Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
And welcome to the Chicago Urban League. My name is Sherry Runner. I'm the interim president and CEO. We're very excited to have this group of people here tonight to talk about the big issue that's happening in our community. And I'm not going to take a lot of time because we don't have a lot of time and we've got a lot of very interesting and important people here. So I am going to introduce Domiti Pongo, who is our moderator for the evening, and we'll get started. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to applaud all of you. Give yourselves a round of applause for being a part of a discussion this important. And it's important that we congratulate you because without the grassroots organizations and the grassroots organizing that's been happening, the changes that we see as they stand today would not be possible. So it's important that we acknowledge not only some of the newsmakers that we have on this panel and prestigious organizations like the Chicago Urban League, but also community members like yourselves who are informed and active. So again, thank you for all that you do and thank you all for being here this evening. Again, my name is Domiti Pongo, news anchor at WVON 1690. We don't have much time, so I'll jump right into the rules and some of the lay of the land so you all can know how this will go. I expect it to be an exciting and spirited discussion, but most importantly, a productive one. I want to remind you all that this is being videotaped, as well as we'll have 2 rounds of dialogue with the panel centered around 2 focus questions, really simple focus questions. But each and every person on this panel is undeniably involved in a really intimate way with some of the issues that we're seeing in this community and seeing that going on in the city of Chicago. So I'm excited for the different ways that this conversation will go. I also want to invite all of you to, if you received cards, raise your hand if you received some sort of card and something to write with. Awesome. If you have not, some of the folks helping out with this event will make sure we get those to you. After each focus question, we're going to have a Q&A session. So you can write down those questions. If something comes to you as a panelist is answering that question, write it down, and we want to hear your thoughts. And then we're going to give you an opportunity to pose those questions to the panel. When you pose those questions, I ask that you keep them at 1 minute. That's a real 1 minute. 60 seconds. I'm timing you. I don't want to cut nobody off tonight, because we want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to get their ideas heard and that the panelists have enough time to respond. Again, if you think of questions throughout the panel, make sure that you write those down. For those of you who tweet, make sure you follow the Chicago Urban League at Chi Urban League, that's CHI Urban League, and use the hashtag Truth and Justice for All to make sure that those who follow you can follow the conversation, all right? Let's be respectful of the panelists and each other. Keep side conversations and noise to a minimum. Please put your phones on vibrate or silent. Please put your phones on vibrate or silent. I'm going to say silent because vibrate, we can still hear that zzz, and we have a lot of news cameras and stations that pick up all of that. So ensure that your phones are on silent and that you're respectful of the panelists. I want to acknowledge some of the legislators that are here this evening. In my nerves, I'm not recognizing anyone.
Senator Hunter.
How you doing, Senator Lightfoot?
Hunter.
I'm sorry. Maddie Hunter, thank you for coming this evening. I also want to acknowledge several others are on the way here. Reverend Jackson is on the way. State Representative Ken Duncan is on the way if he's not here already. And again, Senator Hunter, thank you so much for coming this evening. Pardon my nerves. All right. We're going to get started. Oh, also, want to remind you, again, to tweet with the hashtag Truth and Justice for All is really important because several people are following this conversation. And that's the number 4 all right? We'll go ahead and get started. I'll start with, yes, we'll start with Sherry. We'll start with Sherry Runner. She is the president of the Chicago Urban League, the interim president of Chicago Urban League. We want to thank her for allowing us to use this space to host this discussion. She's a native of Chicago, has been active in the city's civic and cultural life, is passionate about the importance of inspiring youth and African-American lives, right? Established in 1916, the Urban League works for economic, educational, and social progress for African Americans. And if you know anything about the Chicago Urban League, you know that's not just rhetoric. They put those words into action. When we open up this panel, I want you to give a little more about your background, but also give us a positioning statement about what do you think about what we're seeing going on in the city of Chicago right now, and what needs to happen for real systemic change to happen.
I'll be very, very short. I think that the most important thing about what's happening in the city of Chicago is that a light's been shown on the real issues that are plaguing our communities. And we can't miss this moment to really solve some of the problems that we have with drugs and gun violence, as well as economic disparities and educational disparities. So as we talk about what's happening between our communities and the way that they're policed, we also have to talk about all of the other problems that face those communities and what we can do to solve them.
Absolutely. Please give a hand to Sherry Runner. Next to her is Lorenzo Davis, a retired Chicago police commander who began working as an investigator for the Independent Police Review Authority, also known as IPRA. This is the governing body that investigates police-involved shootings. Now, he uncovered that since 2007, of the nearly 400 civilians that have been shot and killed by Chicago police, there was only one of these cases where that shooting was found to be not justified. That means that if you're shot by Chicago police officers, there's a 1 in 400 chance that he'll be decided that is not justified. He was an investigator on that board and was let go because of the conclusions that he had. He had 6 cases in which he found that officers wrongly shot citizens, and he's one of the good guys. And from his purview, his point of view, the good guys didn't have a place on the Independent Police Review Authority. Lorenzo Davis, please give us more about your background and an opening statement.
Okay, I'm a lifelong Chicagoan. I've been involved in trying to make this world a better place for all of our people. I was a Chicago public school teacher for 7 years, a high school history teacher, teaching a lot of African American history. And when I decided to change professions, I became a Chicago police officer. I rose up through the ranks. I had 5 commands in the patrol division, in the detective division, and in the special operations division. After I decided to retire, I'm a lawyer by trade. I have a solo law practice. And I taught criminal justice at Chicago State, Harold Washington College, and a class at Governor State. Then I joined the Independent Police Review Authority as an investigator because I had read that there were a number of police-involved shootings, and I was appalled by the number. I wanted to see if all of these shootings were, in fact, justified. So after a couple of years there, I was promoted to supervising investigator, and therefore I was there for almost 7 years until I was fired recently by the chief administrator, Scott Ando, when I refused to change findings to roughly 6 officer-involved shootings and a number of excessive force complaints. And the struggle continues.
Please put your hands together for Lorenzo Davis. Next on our panel, Mr. Paul Strauss. He's the co-director of litigation for the Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law and is the director of the CLC's Employment Opportunities Project. For over 2 decades, he handled employment discrimination and other civil rights cases. How he relates to the Laquan McDonald case, he was instrumental in the FOIA request, having that submitted. And without he and the work of several others, the Laquan McDonald video wouldn't have been,
Nope, wrong person.
Wrong person, I'm sorry. But he is a civil rights attorney. He's from Yale Law School. I'm so excited, so ahead of myself. I'm thinking about Craig here, who's on my left, who is responsible for that as well. But he's a civil rights attorney. Tell us more about your background and give us an opening statement.
Well, I'm from the Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. The Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights is a not-for-profit consortium of leading Chicago law firms that provides free representation to people with civil rights claims and also provides free services to not-for-profit agencies. I have been a civil rights lawyer since 1981. I was for 25 years, I was a associate and then a partner at Minor, Barnhill and Galland. That firm, Judd Minor and that firm was Mayor Washington's head of the law department. That's also the firm that Barack Obama was in. So I had the privilege of having lunch most days with the person who ended up being the President of the United States. It's a very odd thing to have happen. The city of Chicago right now is at a point where we have a wonderful opportunity, and I believe there is going to be systemic change in the Chicago Police Department. Now, there's two things that I think, or that the Lawyers Committee thinks, are particularly important. First, there is a proposed ordinance proposed by the Community Renewal Society called the Fair Cops Ordinance, which would create a police auditor position, which would monitor which would have subpoena power, have access to all police records, all records of civilian complaints, and would monitor and report on the operations of IPRA that has, as Mr. Davis said, has been completely dysfunctional and ineffective, and of the police board, and would put pressure on them to do their job, which they have not been doing in the past. It's a very important proposed ordinance. We want the members of the City Council to vote in favor of it. The second thing, obviously, that's crucial is the pending Justice Department investigation of the City of Chicago Police Department. The Justice Department has done investigations of this kind in cities like Cleveland, Los Angeles, New Orleans, Albuquerque, Cincinnati, Seattle, and of course, Ferguson, Missouri. If you read the report from Ferguson, you saw how powerful these kinds of investigations can be. The likely result of that investigation is going to be a consent decree with the City of Chicago calling for systemic reforms in the police department and appointment of a monitor to make sure those reforms are carried out. The job of the community is really to make sure that the lawyers from the Justice Department know what the community's concerns are and that the information they need is provided to them to do a proper job and get the kind of reforms that we want. Thank you.
Paul Strauss. Rufus Williams is the President and Chief Executive Officer of BBF Family Services, formerly known as the Better Boys Foundation. I got that right?
You did.
Okay. Formerly known as the Better Boys Foundation. He's also the President and CEO of Olympus LLC, a financial management and professional representation firm. He works with youth, and as he told me before, not just young men, but he works with disadvantaged communities and is sincerely concerned about the welfare of others. His service includes previously serving as the president of the Chicago Board of Education, president of the Children First Fund, and president of the Fund for Inner City Athletic Equipment. He was president of Whitney Young Magnet School. An illustrious resume this gentleman has and a wealth of knowledge he brings. Please give us an opening statement.
Thank you, Domity. Dr. King said, the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in the time of comfort and convenience. The ultimate measure of a man is where he stands in the time of challenge and conflict. This is a moment. This is a defining moment in time. Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, Michael Brown, Eric Gardner, Jordan Davis, Freddie Gray, Walter Scott, Tania Boyd, Sandra Bland. There are reports that show the police killed more than 100 black people in 2014. There are reports that say police have killed at least 310 black people in 2015. Laquan McDonald, may he rest in peace. Laquan McDonald had a short life. He had a very tough life, but his legacy will be long and his legacy will be strong. And it will be so because all of us are here. It will be so because all of us are focused on what took place and what should happen as a result of that. Thank God for Jamie Calvin. Thank God for Craig Futterman. Thank God for Will Calloway. Thank God for the judge who saw the light to make sure that this video was seen by all of us. Sometimes in the darkness, the light shines brightest. This is one of those times. It is with unmitigated sadness that it took the execution of Laquan McDonald to bring all these things to light. It is with unmitigated sadness that all these wrongs and all the evils that have been done to people of color for years, that have been noted, that have been talked about, that have been reported and have been ignored, have now come to light. 200 years of slavery, 90 years of Jim Crow, 35 years of racist housing policies. In all those years, people of color have been over and forcibly policed. Our community is simply asking to be treated like humans. When I asked some of the 17 and 18-year-olds that I work with what they thought about when they saw the video, what they told me was that it looked like they treated him as if he wasn't even human. It takes me back to the signs that we saw in the marches in Memphis, where the signs were held that said, "I am a man. See me, respect me. I am a man." This simply must stop. The effects of what has happened must be reversed, and it must be done now, and it must be done aggressively. Mass incarcerations, wrongful convictions, eyewitness accounts, coerced confessions, false police reports, cash bail, all these things put undue harm upon our community, break up our community, break up our families, impact our futures, impact our children. We want to be safe, we want to be protected, we want to be policed properly, not over-police and not under-police. We want to be safe. We want people to see us as people. We want them to see us in our humanity. My Aunt Angela Davis said, "I will no longer accept the things I cannot change. I will now change the things I cannot accept." Thank you.
Hands together for Rufus Williams, please. To my left now is Craig Futterman. Craig Futterman, the clinical professor of law at the University of Chicago, founder of the Civil Rights Accountability Project, and his work helped to push forward for the release of the Laquan McDonald video. He's the director of the Public Interest Programs and lecturer in law at Stanford Law School. He graduated with the highest distinction from Northwestern University in 1988, where he got a Bachelor of Arts. Another esteemed panelist who has his hands dirty, really working in the city of Chicago to bring about some real change and reform as it relates to police accountability. Can you please give us an opening statement?
Okay, good evening. No trust between large segments of the black community and police. A lot of people talk about the need to restore trust, and if we're going to be honest, never has been. That these problems aren't new. Been with us as long as I've been alive and long before I've been alive.
We can't hear.
I'm sorry. Better? Holding my mouth, my bad. Let's be clear about the challenges, though. What we're facing, I mean, these are the age-old challenges. Talking about racism. We're talking about institutional denial, lack of accountability, the core causes behind our distrust of police. That's what we're up against. In my short time here, or in my years here, I've seen scandal after scandal after scandal. And each time I see our political leaders get up just as they got up now, and it's like the same thing. You hear some heads roll. I'm gonna roll some heads, and yes, some heads have rolled. How many superintendents have we had here in the last number of years? How many heads of IPRA or OPS that was before IPRA or Internal Affairs? Then we're going to create a commission. What we're going to do, we're going to study the problem, come up with some recommendations. Thorough investigation, no stone unturned, right? But after, you know, it's great, the cameras are here and everybody's here and watching. But as soon as we turn away, nobody's had, and none of our leaders have ever had the political courage to address the underlying issues why vast majority of black folks don't trust the police. Why? Addressing those core issues. That said, and I know this is trite to say, but I'm hopeful. I mean, I really am hopeful at this moment. We always talk about, oh, this is the political moment. But But I've never experienced anything like this in my lifetime. And I'm hopeful mostly because of people like Trina, honestly. I'm hopeful because of the activism and engagement of our youth. I mean, Trina and others have forced us, all of us, not just the folks who are most affected, but it forced all of us to reckon with the realities of police abuse in lower income Black and brown communities in Chicago, and for that matter, not just Chicago, but around urban America. More and more difficult to deny these realities because of the work of Trina and others. And video. We got video. I mean, anybody who's seen the horrifying video of the execution, and it was an execution, let's call it duck a duck, of 17-year-old young man, Laquan McDonald. And anybody who's followed this case cannot deny the reality of the power of the police code of silence in Chicago. But more importantly than not just forcing us to know about these things, this is going to sound trite too, Black Lives Matter, forcing us to care. We're seeing the effects of the work of all our kids around the nation, and so I really do believe that this is the greatest opportunity in our history right now for real change, to actually now just not just heads roll, but to address the underlying issues. But bottom line, and what I've learned more than anything else in my short time here, is that it's up to everybody here in this room, and it's up to young folks and old folks to do the work and to make it happen.
Thank you.
Let's put your hands together for Craig Futterman. Next on our panel is Trina Reynolds from Black Youth Project 100. Black Youth Project is reminiscent almost of what Rufus Williams mentioned a moment ago. He said, back in the day, you would see signs that said, "I am a man, see me, respect me," right? That's tangential to the Black Lives Matter movement. It's just respecting the humanity of people of color. This young woman is part of a Black Youth Project 100, which has been instrumental in some of the protests that we've been seeing in the city of Chicago. She's a special initiatives coordinator with Public Allies AmeriCorps member. She coordinates activities in the Youth Asset Development Program, and again, is an active member of BYP 100. She is a student, she's young, and she's that energy and activism that we need and that we so seek from my generation. I'm talking as if we aren't close to the same age.
Same thing.
But can you please give us more about your background and an opening statement, please, Trina?
Okay, so I am not as esteemed as Craig or the other people on this panel. I'm young, I'm a recent college graduate, and thank you for whoever clapped. And I am a part of the Black Youth Project 100. That is an organization that is an all-Black, a group of all-Black organizers, ages 18 to 35, who operate under a Black queer feminist lens, okay? That means that we are not only focusing on Black men, we are focusing on all oppressed Black people, right? We're talking about trans people. We're talking, the LGBTQ community needs to be recognized when we talk about these issues. They're harassed by the police as well. And so my answer to giving a perspective statement on where things are now in the city, I think people are tired. I think that time and time again, we see these officials try to talk down the crowd once we see these officials see the pressure, right? And then then they start to speak and say what we want them to say, or what they think we want them to say. Okay, the DOJ should have been here a long time ago when Mr. Lorenzo Davis was fired. Okay, because way before him, right? And so what I see about the city today, my perspective of how we feeling, we're tired. We're tired of listening to Mayor Rahm Emanuel. And there's a quote that came to mind when I think about the task force and all these things that Rahm is pushing. And I believe it's by Audre Lorde. And she says, "We will not dismantle the master's house with the master's tools." And I think we are not going to use his tools to dismantle this clear systemic institutional problem that's been going on in Chicago forever, right? So that's how I'm feeling right now. Yeah, thank you.
And finally, journalist, human rights activist with the Invisible Institute, Jamie Calvin. His work has appeared in a variety of publications, among them Slate, The Nation, the Columbia Journalism Review, the Chicago Tribune, the Chicago Sun-Times, the Chicago Reader. He's been on MSNBC. He's also one of the many men responsible for the FOIA request that resulted in the release of the Laquan McDonald video. Please give us an opening statement, more about your background, and let us know what you think about where we stand as a city right now.
So, as you demonstrated by reciting my bibliography, I'm a writer. So I think about this in narrative terms and think back to the day well over a year ago when Craig and I first heard the name Laquan McDonald from a whistleblower within the city, close to the investigation, who did not trust the institutions of the city to adequately investigate what we now know to have been the execution of a child on the streets of Chicago. We've spent a good deal of energy over this last year prying loose the evidence in order to tell that story. I have to say, at this moment, I am completely amazed and gratified and awed by what has happened and we've played a small part in. This is one story. This is one story of countless stories that illustrate the same fundamental structural injustices in our society. And I think the challenge going forward, or among the many challenges going forward, is to fully tell that story. We're in a moment right now where the mayor and the power structure in the city have lost control of the narrative. They've lost control of the narrative. That's what we see. We see the news conferences where the mayor can't kind of get his footing and look so anxious. They've lost control of the narrative. That creates space. You know, it creates space for the young people in the street. It creates space for the lawyers, the civil rights lawyers in court, for journalists like us. It creates space to reconstruct that narrative. And I've come to think of this moment, this amazing moment we're sharing, just unprecedented. I didn't expect to see it in my lifetime, as being similar to the sort of truth and reconciliation moments we've seen in South Africa and in some other nations, making a transition from being one kind of society to being another kind of society. And in the course of that, addressing the fundamental defining structural issues in the society. The critical requirement, and there are many, but a critical condition for doing that is that we acknowledge the realities, that all the stories come out, that the things that people know individually become part of a larger public acknowledgement. And when that happens, it becomes possible to be diagnostically smart about the kinds of reforms that are necessary. So among the things that I think we all should be demanding, and now day to day, demanding it from day to day, is that it all come out. That we find out about the other Laquan McDonalds, that we are given the information we need to do the kind of biopsy of these systems that's required to adequately reform them. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, your panelists for the evening. So we'll go ahead and get started. It's going to be an open discussion. I'll start it off by posing one question, one focused question. I want you all to answer individually. If someone hears anything among the panelists that you want to jump in on, feel free, and that will serve as your remark. After that, as you listen to what the panelists are saying, go ahead and jot down your questions. After they answer this question, we're going to go into a Q&A where you all can pose questions to our panelists, all right? So I'll start with posing the same question. I'm going to pose this to all of the panelists, but I'll start with Paul. And it's sprung kind of from what Jamie Calvin said just a moment ago, right? He talked about this international view kind of what we're seeing. He says what the moment we're seeing now reminds him of what you saw in South Africa. And he says that we can be diagnostically smart about how this works, right? How can we really bring about specific, tangible change? And so the first question is a simple one. How do we police the police? How do we ensure police accountability And do you have, Paul, examples or things that you've seen in cities where similar things have happened and where some of these oversight or these investigations and the reports have come out where it worked?
Well, rather than answer that question, which is too hard for me, let me say that two things. One is that it's going to be difficult, even if you have the best of intentions, to control police officers because they work remotely. They're not in a headquarters situation where they're immediately seen by supervisors. They necessarily have the power to use deadly force. They have to act with discretion, and they are led often by, or feel they're led by, police union management rather than police management. So that even if you had leadership at the top, which we haven't had, that has the best of intentions, it's a difficult task to control individual police officers at the street level. And so reform is going to have to figure out a way to hold police accountable and solve that management problem. It's just like running a business management problem. Running the police is a serious management problem. And the second point I want to make is, with respect to the Department of Justice investigation, it's not clear yet. We don't know what they're really going to cover. Almost certainly they're going to cover excessive use of force by the police. But they could cover many other topics. Are they going to cover stop and frisk policies by the police? Are they going to cover the fact that there are traffic stops in minority neighborhoods but not in white neighborhoods? Are they going to cover the question of whether there is racial discrimination with respect to police activities in the city of Chicago? I was reading today the findings of the Justice Department with respect to its investigation of the Cleveland police force, and they limited their investigation to the question of excessive use of force. So we need to, if we want the Justice Department investigation to go beyond that, then we're going to have to press to have these other issues concerned and not have it be limited just to the question of excessive use of force.
Lorenzo, how do we ensure police accountability? We have different options. We have these mechanisms. We have IPRA, right? Hasn't been doing his job. Before that, as someone on the panel said, you had OPS. Would a civilian review board be a viable option? What ways can we effectively police the police and ensure that they're accountable?
Well, it should be civilian oversight of the police. Right now, that's what the Independent Police Review Authority was supposed to be. But it was inadequate from the beginning. It was created by ordinance from the City Council. And if you read it, to summarize it, it simply says that the mayor will appoint a chief administrator and with the consent of the City Council, and then the chief administrator will do everything else. So, that ordinance is very inadequate. If you choose the wrong chief administrator, such as Scott Ando, a career DEA agent, and he brought in as his first deputy another career DEA agent. Both of them had over 30 years in law enforcement. The question becomes, why would you put these guys in that position? Who vetted them? What was their background? And I find the same problem with virtually all of Rahm Emanuel's appointments. The presidents of the school board, he keeps choosing wrongly. The Independent Police Review Authority, his pick was ill-advised. And now you have another chief administrator Nobody knows how she was chosen. Nobody knows what her background is, except she was a prosecutor. And so you have a prosecutor who perhaps prosecuted some of the very people that might be complaining about police excessive force and misconduct. I'm told, or someone, John Cass, has written about Rahm Emanuel's kitchen cabinet, his advisors, who is advising him on these appointments. What he does not do is involve the community representatives before he makes his appointments. When I was fired by the Independent Police Review Authority, and the interest in my story was actually national, no one from the mayor's office called me or spoke to me to find out what my grievances were or what I felt the problems were in the Independent Police Review Authority. How long had he decided that he would replace Scott Ando? And as soon as Scott Ando retired, he had someone to take his place. And as I said, who advised him to appoint this particular person? Who advised him to put Lori Lightfoot on his task force? She was over the Office of Professional Standards, which did not do its job, and it was replaced by the Independent Police Review Authority. And the policies of the Office of Professional Standards became the policies of the Independent Police Review Authority. The investigators at the Office of Professional Standards are working today at the Independent Police Review Authority. Many of them worked under Lori Lightfoot. So now you have her reviewing her policies.
Well, in his remarks this morning, he made a point to say that this police task force that he's put together isn't under his guidance or direction. Do you have any confidence in the task force that he put together today? And do you have any confidence in a body like IPRA? Does it need to be dismantled altogether? And is this police task force the right direction to go at all?
Well, we do need a civilian oversight body. I believe in that. Should the Independent Police Review Authority be dismantled completely? You have some good investigators there, but you also have some bad ones. You have some who, up until recently, a few who have worked for OPS and the Independent Police Review Authority for 15 years and had never, ever found that a police officer had committed excessive force. One statistic they've been mentioning in the press recently was that out of 10,000 complaints of excessive force, only 19 officers received any meaningful discipline. Once again, even Rahm Emanuel is saying that that sort of result defies common sense. So we need someone to think outside the box. We need to look at some solutions we have not looked at before. I know that some of the demonstrators out there, like CPAC, has came up with some ideas. As everyone has said, I'm gratified that the young people have become involved. Young people.
I want to throw it to Sherry too, because you said something I want to jump on. It defies common sense. Sherry, how do we bring common sense back into the way we ensure police accountability in the city of Chicago?
Well, I think there are a number of different problems. Just before he was fired or resigned, Superintendent McCarthy did a listening tour, a kind of silent listening tour throughout our communities. And during that listening tour, he made a point of saying that there is a lot of implicit bias in the police force, and they know it, and they don't know what to do about it. But I think one thing that can be done about it is diversifying the police force itself so that they have a better cultural understanding of the communities that they're policing to begin with. So I think that's one piece that we haven't talked about, and as Paul said, when the Department of Justice comes in, we have to shed the light on all the practices that are going on in the police department, not just those that revolve around excessive force, because I think it is a structural problem for the police department completely.
Absolutely. I also want to acknowledge Alderman Pat Dow. Thank you for joining us this evening for this discussion. Rufus Williams, can you give us your thoughts on how we ensure police accountability? How do we do it?
Well, I think that in this age of technology, some things become simpler. So we need dash cams. We need dash cams on all police cars. We need them to work. We need
With
the audio
sound.
to work. With sound, with audio. We need those, we need the video to be transparent. We need to see it. It needs to come out within a week or two unless there is something that keeps that from hampering the investigation. But that needs to be, we need to see it. There needs to be immediate accountability for erroneous and false police reports. There needs to be protection for whistleblowers. There are things that can simply, easily be put in place that keeps everybody on alert and keeps everybody knowledgeable about what happens. I think, as it's already been mentioned, the panels and things that have been suggested, you know, I am a CPA by training, and as an auditor, we always had to issue reports to the highest level. And so these reports and these people who have been presented, if it still goes back to the same place that we currently have no faith in, then we have no faith in the system that works. Mm-hmm. There is a poster in one of our classrooms at BBF where it simply is a sister holding up a sign that simply says the whole system is guilty. Mm-hmm. And so unless we can go to a higher level and have these things be reported, a place that we can truly have trust in, then we can't have that trust. But transparency helps to shine a light on all of it.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I'm going to go this way. We're running up against the clock just a bit, so I'm going to ask for Jamie and Craig to kind of tag team this question. How do we ensure police accountability from a community involvement standpoint, right? And I ask that meaning community members in terms of their vocation, because you have several journalists we were just talking upstairs about a gentleman who sent forth a FOIA request asking for your help and kind of wording it and getting that language right. How do we educate community members to know what the process is like when we want to push for reform, when we want to ask for these things to happen? How do we make more informed protests? What do we do? What do we do? How do we ensure?
So one thing I would mention is that as a result of the work Craig and I and others have done over the years, we have broken through the wall of secrecy in the city. There is a principle now that police misconduct files belong to the public. You know, subject to deleting a few personal information, a social security number of an officer, home address, but the fundamental information, the underlying investigation belongs to all of us. And, you know, that's a recent decision, and we're fighting a counterattack from the police union that is arguing that these records beyond 5 years should be destroyed. But it's an extraordinary resource that is available to all of us. We've created a public database called the Citizens Police Data Project. If you Google that, you'll find it. And all this material is online. We're constantly gathering more. We're encouraging civil rights lawyers, journalists, citizens who access these documents for their own purposes to pass them on to us. So there's this expanding public resource. And I think it's just important to know as citizens that we have that power. But you know, as we've said, I'm very proud that this decision is known as the Calvin decision. So I don't like titles. I don't like titles at all. But I'm sort of proud that there's Calvin versus Chicago sounds good to me. But you know, so people should know that they have this power, but it doesn't, you know, happen on its own. So there's a principle that exists, but unless we exercise that principle, the power is meaningless.
Yeah, let me just, I still can't, yes, no?
Yep.
Close enough? All right. Following up with Jamie, but I want to go back one step first, is also the feds aren't going to solve this problem for us either. And, you know, so the first comment about the feds and it should be a broader ranging investigation or this size investigation, all well said and done. But we'll be here long after the feds are gone. We'll be here long after the feds are gone. And there have been lots of police chiefs who've been here and a culture that's outlasted each and every one of them. And so I want to start with where Jamie left off, which is that change isn't going to happen unless we make it happen. All our work, all the work that Jamie has done, all of us, to open up the police departments to everybody, guess what? That doesn't automatically eliminate the racism or the sexism within those departments. It doesn't automatically end the code of silence. And it certainly doesn't guarantee, as Lorenzo was talking about, that we're going to have fair, thorough, or high-quality investigations into police misconduct. And it certainly doesn't put an end to patterns of police abuse. But what it does do is, and this is what Jamie is talking about, is that it creates the conditions for us, all of us, to accomplish each of those things if we actually make use of that information. I mean, all the lawsuits in the world, so I bring this lawsuit, are not going to be effective. All the data in the world, all the information in the world isn't going to be effective unless people on the ground use it and hold police accountable. All the data that we pride out and some that Lorenzo just talked about the absolutely almost zero chance that meaningful discipline happens, well, that's going to be meaningless unless young people like from We Charge Genocide don't take that data to the UN and start fighting for change with it. And it's the lawsuit standing by itself, but just putting that information out there doesn't mean anything unless people use it. So, I mean, to me, and I think, and Jamie and I have had this conversation before, but the solutions aren't, you know, it's not that hard. We've known about what needs to be done for a long time. We know what the issues have been for a long time. And the real question really is, to me, why haven't we acted before? I mean, why do we always, and this is not just the folks in the room, why do we always just throw up our hands in futility when it comes to issues of race? You know, what's up with our massive civic demoralization about and defensiveness when we start talking about racism or white privilege? So sadly, I mean, and this is where, I mean, Trina, Black Lives Matter, and so many folks have made such a difference because our failure to act stems from something a lot more than just our failure to know about what the problems are. I mean, anyone who has seen, who saw that video, saw Officer Van Dyke shoot one of our children like a dog in the street, followed by everything else that's come out. You can't deny everything that's come out. No one who's seen this with eyes can deny the code of silence, the cover-up. But it's also about, and that's the thing, so it's not just about not knowing, it's about what I said earlier, it's about not caring enough about the lives of the most marginalized among us. And this is like the whole Kanye thing too. It's about our, I mean, I don't want to be too Kanye, but it's about our failure to care about black people sufficiently. I mean,
If you quote Kanye, you're good with me, Craig. We're gonna, I want to open up the floor to community members.
No, you got one more.
Oh, no, wait, I got you. So as you guys are getting ready, our runners are going to go and acknowledge those who have questions. So as we get that process going, while that's happening, I would like for Trina to address it. You know I'm not going to forget about you. Try to save the best for last. No, I got you, sister. Come on now. Go ahead and tell me, how do you feel we really ensure police accountability?
Okay, so for one, like, is there a way we can like test our police officers for sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, all of this stuff? Because teaching them how to engage with people who are having issues with mental health, because sometimes these implicit bias that, not Superintendent Gary McCarthy, but Gary, some of these implicit biases that Gary mentioned before are explicit. They have been explicit. We encounter them every day. So I wish there was a way that we could just take a magical test, but I'm gonna give you a couple more things that we can do instead of that, because that's a magical test, and when it gets created, please let me know. For one, we need increased Department of Justice enforcement of existing civil rights laws, right? These laws exist. Right. It's not like they don't, some of these laws exist, right? It's that measures aren't being taken for them to be properly enforced. It's like when we got the right to vote, right? We had the right to vote, but people couldn't register to vote, people, let alone go into the voting house and take a vote, right? Like, it takes more than a law. We need enforcement. For two, we need CPAC, right? Hey, okay. We need the Civilian Police Accountability Council. Someone with real power, not that we're just gonna put some input in and like recommend, right? Somebody mentioned like we tired of recommendations. We need someone with real hiring, firing, subpoena, and budgeting power. Like I said earlier, we're not gonna use the master's tools to dismantle the master's house, and Rahm Emanuel's task force is not enough. And then lastly, to comment on IPRA, BYP 100 has gone to IPRA countless police board meetings, countless. I think, is it every third Thursday now? I think it's on my calendar at this point, on repeat, right? So we've gone there demanding that Officer Dante Servant be fired. And how long did it take? How long did it take for them to recognize us, to acknowledge us? It took too long. IPRA is illegitimate. I'm all about CPAC, okay? And I think that's where I'll leave off, because on time.
You see why I left you for last, right? The best for last?
Well,
okay, there we go. There we go.
You.
I want to open up the floor to the audience. We have about 15 minutes for Q&A on that topic. How do we assure police accountability? Oh, here we are, right here. Thank you, sir. So a question from the crowd. It says, how can the Fraternal Order of Police be held civically liable for creating or perpetuating an environment where the Chicago police, as well as other police officers throughout the nation, feel free to abuse their power and use excessive force? All right, so how can the FOP, the police union, be held liable throughout the nation for the fact that they feel free to abuse their power and use the excessive use of force? How can we essentially prosecute, I believe the question is asking, and hold them accountable and effectively, again, it goes back to the original question. How do we hold them accountable for what they've done and enforce, as she said, some of these Justice Department laws that already exist? Is there a way? Is there a way for Fraternal Order of Police unions to effectively be held accountable for that thing?
Wow.
I'll go to the lawyers here. Is it possible?
Okay.
Is there a way for us to prosecute the FOP?
I don't think so. I don't think there is a way to sue or prosecute the Fraternal Order of Police, but I think that it's the city that enters into that contract with the Fraternal Order of Police, and what we can do is demand that the city change the provisions of that collective bargaining agreement. The collective bargaining agreement now gives police officers many advantages in avoiding investigation, including, for instance, a 24-hour period before, I believe this is right, Mr. Davis, a 24-hour period before they're interviewed.
Yes.
So it's a period of time where they can get their stories straight and cooperate with each other. And that should be changed. So.
And is that changed in contract negotiations with the city council?
Yes. Contract negotiations. The negotiations are not carried on with the entire city council at one time, but contract negotiations with the city. We need to get that collective bargaining agreement changed.
Can I jump in just on that question?
Please.
I'll be quick on the first part in terms of lawsuits. It is possible. And indeed, in New York, and I'm forgetting the brother's name, and sad case in New York where that brother was sodomized some years ago.
Abdul Wima.
Abdul Wima, thank you. and I don't want to disrespect him by not remembering his name, my old ass. But that's not that. But in that case, actually, Union itself was also held liable as part of a conspiracy in New York, and there was some creative civil rights lawyering there. But I do want to go back to Paul's comment because this is what's really critical, and there's something that folks need to know about this going on right now. The city and police unions, and not just here in Chicago, but everywhere, have been bargaining away the public right, all of our rights to our records, to accountability, to openness, and to transparency right now. And it's just coming to light, and it's coming to light only because some folks actually by accident noticed, because there are private agreements right now to destroy all police misconduct records. Destroy all police misconduct records that are 5 years or more old. And that's what the contracts say. There's a contract that the city agreed to. So I mean, and this is Paul's point, because this doesn't happen unless the city agrees to it. A contract is an agreement between two parties. I'm talking the city of Chicago.
Are you talking aldermen?
I'm talking, the city of Chicago enters a contract that's approved, yes, by city council too. It's a negotiating process, but have bargained away core accountability issues. Let's just start with, let's just say this one point. Let me say it one more time. Destroying all police misconduct records that are more than 5 years old. We got people right now who are still in prison. A man was released just about a month and a half ago, Sean Worrell, after spending 25 years in prison, and he was released because there was evidence of documented police torture that went back. They're talking about destroying. Once it's destroyed forever. And not just talking about history. There are people in prison right now, number one. Number two, there are officers who are out there right now who've engaged in patterns of abuse. And we're talking about at a time when, you know, at this time, can you imagine this? At this time, we're talking about destroying the very evidence. You destroy the evidence, you're never going to have accountability. So bottom line is, we have to hold the city and the unions accountable, not to let the city bargain away the rights of the people.
Domity, let me add to that real quickly, not as a lawyer, but you know, the mayor concluded his comments today by saying everything is in our power to right that wrong. And so all these things that have been discussed as it relates to the FOP and that contract, all these things that put upon us every single moment need to be corrected. And they need to be corrected now. We can't wait until whenever the time is to renegotiate the contract. The time is now. We see what all those things are, and wherever the force can come to help make those changes happen. The mayor concluded by saying everything is in our power to right that wrong. We should hold them to that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Awesome answer. I want to remind you all, too, when you write your questions, because we may not be able to get through all of them, please put your email addresses, because we want to make sure that we can respond to you via email and answer those questions and take care of some of those, all right? The next one is, I hear themes of lack of trust and social issues. Are there people in the community that we do trust, that we recommend to take over some of these positions? For example, we're calling for, speaking in terms of what activists have said, they say we're calling for the recall of, or the resignation of State's Attorney Anita Alvarez, for example. Fox or Moore, who's the right person? Who are other people within the community that we do trust to put them in these positions? I don't want to put people on the spot to give endorsements, but how do we vet community members so that we can take back the power in the city of Chicago?
I think it's an interesting question right now, especially as we face trying to determine who will be the next police superintendent. Under the circumstances that we face in the city and the turmoil with regard to all of the systemic issues that we face, how will we be a part of, how will the community be a part of choosing or advising the mayor on who that next person will be? And I know that this comes from the police board, that the recommendations come from the police board, but at what point will we be a part of a community input into who that person will be? And it's important because we need to have a Chicagoan in that role, and a Chicagoan who knows Chicago and its unique and very different community. And we don't necessarily want to have that person be a career policemen either, because that will create or just perpetuate the same problems that we already face.
I do think there's I think what Sherry says is absolutely right. There's going to be a real problem in promoting to police superintendent one of the high-ranking officials from the police department, the acting superintendent Escalante. I believe my understanding was the head of detectives at the time of the Laquan McDonald shooting, and he basically approved improved Officer Van Dyke's actions. He's not obviously the person that should be the police superintendent. And it's going to be a problem to get somebody from current leadership in the police department who's not implicated in these practices.
But when the problems are so deeply embedded within the Chicago Police Department, it seems daunting and nearly impossible to find someone who has experience but isn't complicit. Pat Hill. And that becomes the question. So is it possible for someone who's not based here locally, who has experience, who has a clean record, who can come to the city of Chicago that we may trust? Or would that be problematic because, as you said, you want someone who is vested in the community in the city of Chicago? Is that something to consider, though, that we get a veteran cop from another community?
We would prefer a policeman from the city of Chicago. Unfortunately, many of the people at the top, there it becomes very political. I was told, and it proved to be true, that any rank above, really any rank from commander and above is political. The aldermen usually have some say-so in who gets those positions, and City Hall has to approve of anyone placed in that position. Some aldermen have a say-so in the community, at least they try. For instance...
You mean unofficially have say-so?
Yes, unofficially. They make phone calls. They make recommendations. They put pressure on the superintendent to move commanders or to get the person who they want. Maybe not all the people, but there are some. Like that's an example. Ike Carruthers tried to control me when I was a commander, and he asked Superintendent Hillard to replace me a number of times. Then you have Terry Peterson, who I was told he could have my job, or I was told this by the chief of patrol. He could have the chief of patrol's job. He could have the first deputy superintendent's job. He could have my job. He could have any job he wanted. And that's what James Maurer told me. At the time, the first deputy superintendent was, I can't recall his, I can't recall his name right now. But, I was told that in his office. So you do have politics, and some of the aldermen are more powerful, or more influential, we might say, with the mayor than others. So, there has to be, out of 10,000 police officers, some who would make a very good superintendent. How we get to those people, if they're not in the upper echelon of the police department, that might be a problem. But people, can suggest and recommend people, and then, you should vet and look into the backgrounds of the people who have been recommended.
I'm going to pose this next question to Trina, and it's somewhat related to the previous one. It says there are many, many older people who are behind you. What more can we do to force Alvarez and Emmanuel to step down? They say, P.S., continued pressure will force them to go. And the reason why I say it's related to the previous one is because after they step down, then what happens? But what more can the older generation do to help you achieve your goals of getting them to resign?
Okay. So for that question, I'm gonna say that if so for the older generation, right? Because BYP is an organization that is ages 18 to 35, so there's a ton of people who are aged out of being in BYP, but there is plenty of room for collaboration and conversation. And so I think what is really unique about BYP 100 is our Black queer feminist lens, right? A lot of people are not as accepting of that kind of lens. A lot of people are not accepting of the LGBTQ community. A lot of organizations prioritize the oppression of Black men over the oppression of Black women. We use that rhetoric a lot. And I think that's just something that history has to do with. But so as far as the older generation goes, when talking about what can y'all do to support or to be in line or to teach us, right? Because we need intergenerational spaces, is to be open to conversation. Schedule a meeting, a one-on-one meeting with our national director, reach out to us and have conversations with us about what we've been doing. And then, right, ask us that question when I'm not on a panel in front of all these cameras and really, this is my first panel, so I'm extremely nervous when I'm speaking to y'all. But reach out because we need each other. We need each other, and we also have, y'all also have to give us space for leadership, right? Because a lot of times, our older generation will say, like, I've been through this, okay, so I know. Like, I know what to do. I've seen it before, like, this is what you need to do. And we, as the young people, are just saying, like, well, this is our input, you know what I mean? Give us, show us that we are valuable because we are valuable. Acknowledge our voice, right? We're not kids. We've lived. I'm a Black young woman born and raised on the South Side of Chicago. I might not be as accredited or have the life experience of any of these people on the panel, but that doesn't mean that my perspective and my input is not as important as y'all. So collaboration. That's what I have to say.
Absolutely.
And I pose that question because you are where I used to be and where I am today. And it's about white supremacy and fighting this injustice and standing up for what is happening to our young people. So we are behind you.
Thank you.
We're glad to sit down with you and meet with you. I started when I was 14 years old. I am 70 now. I was under Medgar Evers. I was a member of the NAACP Youth Council under Medgar Evers. I remember when he was shot down like a dog in his driveway, and that pain is still with me today. So we support you. It's not about your sexuality. It's about your human rights. Human rights of Black people receiving everything that white people receive. It's about doing away with white supremacy. So we will be glad to sit down with you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And this is how it starts. This is how it starts. I'm going to squeeze in time for one more question. I also want to add something to the last one. We talk about the resignation of the mayor. Just today came across my desk, the State Representative LaShawn Ford put forth a bill that's a mechanism through which the mayor could be forced to resign or asked to resign. Previously, that mechanism didn't exist without a bill that will call forth for that type of thing. So if that's something that you're interested in, I encourage you to look at that. This next question I'm going to pose to Paul. It says, the COP ordinance that you spoke about earlier, what needs to happen so that this won't be marginalized and so that the community can support you? You spoke about that. If you could sum it up again briefly, what it intends to do,
Right.
and then what you would like for these folks to do to make it a reality.
It's called the Fair Cops Ordinance. It was proposed by the Community Renewal Society. It would create a police auditor that would have subpoena power and access to all police records and all records of civilian complaints about excessive force or police misconduct. It would review the activities of IPRA and the police board and report to the public on their activities, and it would have the authority to propose legislation to the city council. The police auditor would be independently appointed, not by the mayor, but by a group called the Police Assessment Resource Center, which is a not-for-profit agency often involved in monitoring city police forces after Justice Department decrees. So the Black Caucus in the City Council needs to support this. The Hispanic Caucus needs to support it. The Progressive Caucus needs to support it. And we need to pressure our aldermen to get behind this ordinance and pass it. I have a copy of it, so anybody afterwards wants a copy, I'm happy to give you a copy. A link, that's, I believe it's on our website, the Chicago Lawyers Committee website.
Absolutely, and if you have any links to the resources, a lot of these that I'm putting to the side are questions about resources. Someone asked about CPAC. How can they join? When you guys meet, and what the leadership process is like there. So at some point, make sure that you put your emails on these questions so we can get these answers out to each and every one of you. All right. We're going to move to the next portion of our panel, where we ask, where do we go from here? What do we want to see as a community when it comes to systemic, to changing what we see? We need systemic outcomes as a result of the release of this video. And how can we make sure that we move forward? We already covered that in a way. Right? We covered that in several ways. A few solutions, supporting the Fair Cop ordinance that he's talking about. Talked about changing collective bargaining with the police union. The rule that involves destroying records that have been around for more than 5 years. But what do we tangibly and specifically expect to see once this is all said and done? I'll start that. Actually, I'll start this way and move this way. I want to get Jamie back into the discussion.
So I think before we talk about the ultimate outcomes and what reform would ultimately look like, we need to think about the process. There are multiple processes going on. We have the Department of Justice coming. We're not sure how narrow or broadly they will intervene. They could come in a fairly narrow way, and it could broaden over time. I think the critical question about process is, how do we, the multiple we's that are engaged at this moment, stay engaged, keep the pressure on, and make sure that there's a public process and a process that lives and is rooted in the various communities most affected by these patterns of abuse and impunity for abusers. And I think so when we talk about the mayor's task force, or when we talk about the mayor, or when we talk about prospective superintendent, I think there's a danger, and we often fall into this, of thinking that somebody's going to come and fix this for us, that there's going to be some person, some enlightened leader, or some, the best possible police chief who's going to come and deal with this. I don't expect that. I think we're going to have limited mortals, some of them better than others, who are going to be in these positions. Their ability to function and to do the right thing and to stay on the path is going to be determined by their circumstances, by the pressures they're under, by the accountability they're held to by citizens. And so, there's so much energy right now. There's so much moral outrage. It's an extraordinary time. It's extraordinarily stirring. But how all that energy coalesces into a broad coalition that has all these different dimensions, is in the streets and is in the halls of power and is in the press, how that comes together behind a common agenda and stays on it and holds people accountable. Because I think ultimately it's not so much a matter of finding the transcendent leaders, the great public officials. It's a matter of us as citizens taking co-responsibility for these issues. These problems don't exist apart from us. They aren't in some other space apart from us. In taking responsibility for them, I think we can make even our limited and often mediocre public officials more effective.
I think, there's another piece to that, and we all have to remind ourselves that in March there's a primary election. And as long as we stay engaged, educated, get registered, and get everybody out to vote, it will make a huge difference in who is representing us. And that has been a historical problem in the city of Chicago, low voter turnout, and then people shrug their shoulders like, why is this happening to us? So we need to make sure that this election is more important than any other election that we've had in the past 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Rufus? You want to chime in on what would you like to see as far as a long-term outcome as a result of all that's happening today?
I got a feeling you're winding down. Is this my last time to talk?
No. Go ahead.
I think a lot of things. I think first and foremost, programs are progress, but policy is power. There are policies that exist that absolutely need to change in order to see real things happen in our community and give us some real strength. And some policies are simple. Don't shoot to kill. Don't shoot us in the back. And maybe a simple policy of don't shoot black people. There are things that can happen that are simple and clear, that are policy related, that we need to see and we need to really force in to really see some change happen.
I want to go to Trina. What does a long-term outcome specifically look like to you?
So, first and foremost, I think we need to fund Black futures. I think so 40% of the city's budget, Mayor Rahm Emanuel has allocated to policing. And I think it's pretty irresponsible. I think it's especially irresponsible when we have these closing of mental health institutions. We have these schools are there are all these, especially given what's going on with Governor Runner, I think we need to invest in setting a living wage. We need to fully fund healthcare, social services, public schools. We need sustainable economic development projects and Black businesses that support Black communities. Mm-hmm. So we need to fund Black. We need to number one. I wanted to comment on the election in March.
Please.
So Black people make up, I believe, a third of the population of Chicago, right? Mm-hmm. So you use that third plus the allies that Black and brown people have in this city. And that is a huge chunk of voters who have power and who can make decisions on who we want, next time. Who are we going to allow to occupy our space? Because it looks like the people occupying our space right now, they don't care. They don't care about us. Or they're more worried about lining their pockets, I would say.
What you said right there, too, relates to one of the questions that we had earlier that we didn't get a chance to get to. How do we effectively vet these folks and get the information about these candidates? What is the best way to organize around those candidates that we believe in? Now, of course, we know that the African-American community is not monolithic. Mm-hmm. Your organization is a stark representation of that, right? But how do you make sure that we can get a candidate that most of the community believes in that can galvanize around that person?
So we need to call on our aldermen, alderwomen. We need to be more engaged in the process. A lot of times, I think somebody mentioned earlier, sometimes we just kind of get this we don't really, we're not valuable. Like we can't make change, right? That's sometimes we're like, my vote doesn't count.
Yeah,
there's a lot of voter apathy. And so what I would say to that is, like, your vote does matter. You are 1/3 of the population in Chicago. Now, with your vote, if you haven't been voting before, that on top of, like, the people who have already been voting, right? You being more engaged with the people who you are allowing to occupy your space, knowing and understanding what kind of things that they support, what kind of things they've already signed off on, because a lot of these, everybody's not on the freedom side. Everybody's not on the freedom side, no matter what color they are, right? And so as far as, like, vetting people out, we can't just vote for brown names, Mr. Johnson and Miss Lee. You know what I'm saying? We really need to engage these people, and that can be as little as going to the monthly meeting, right? But we need to make some time to engage some of these officials so that we can, so I'm not gonna endorse anybody today, but I'm saying everybody should go out and learn about what people have already done so they can make those informed decisions.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Craig, what does it look like to you, long-term, a long-term outcome?
I grew up both seeing the amount of harm that bad officers could do, but I've also seen the amount of good that good officers can do.
A little closer for me.
Sure. We need good police. I don't hate police. But what we need, and this is what Jamie, I think, was talking about as well, in terms of it's a police force that is accountable to the people and a police force that work for us, not an occupier, as folks have said. I also, I guess, if I had a visions of what I'd like to see, I've met and I know thousands of great officers who are out there, and and that include Commander Davis. And when we have a situation where the majority of good officers are fearful of the abusive ones and seeing that the department stands behind the abusive ones, I mean, that's what we also, I think, need to recognize. And I represented back as a younger lawyer, African American Police League. And there are good folks out there who also, hate brutality and hate the racism that is a part and a reality of the police force as much as any of us in this room. And yet, we have this code of silence. So I guess I envision a police force, or what I hope that we see at the end of the day is a police force that ultimately serves all of us. And to get there, at least, and for community, also for us to do our job that Jamie was talking about, to me, starts with honesty. That's what Jamie was talking about. It starts with honesty. Until, we talk, if there's gonna be any trust, the same thing I would teach my daughters, if you're gonna be with any relationship they're involved in. Any relationship of trust is built on honesty. So that means practically, let's just talk practically. What that means is when an incident goes down, when there's a police shooting, when there's a charge of brutality or violation of rights, that you're honest with people. Guess what? Is that novel? Is that a novel approach? We've had for years, and this is the question to really ask ourselves and also ask our leaders and say, how is this working for us? We've had years of denial when something goes down, and Laquan McDonald is a perfect example. I mean, I don't want to say it's every day that an execution, even though once a week a police officer in Chicago shoots a person, 75% of the people are black. But I don't want to say that every day what happened, what we saw in this video, happens in Chicago. But what does happen every day is what happened immediately after the shooting. And that's no matter what. Even some of the officers, and I want to say this, the officers who were there ahead of time before Van Dyke got out, they were doing the right thing. They were giving the young man some space. They had a reason to either arrest him or to try to get him help to take him to the hospital, but he didn't pose an immediate danger to anyone, so they followed him. They called for backup. They tried to get some other help on the scene until Cowboy arrives. But what happens after Cowboy arrives and executes the young man is that code of silence from above to below goes completely into effect. And so that's what needs to change. That's what needs to change, and that can change. That means practically, again, it means simple things like, and it starts with leadership, is you protect officers who come forward. I've talked with officers around the nation. And I hear stories about officers who've broken the code of silence, have brought about real reform, have done incredible things, and we all owe them a debt. But then I'll talk to a room packed full of officers, I ask this question, and I've never gotten a hand to raise. Can you tell me, though, a happy ending for an officer who broke the code of silence? I get a lot of happy endings about what happens to the department and that, but no. And we need to protect, not just to protect, but actually to recognize as heroes and sheroes that they are. We wouldn't be having this conversation if someone from within the city didn't come. Shoot, when I read that piece when I read the piece in the newspaper when Laquan McDonald was killed, and I'm sorry, this is true with pretty much everybody in this room, nobody was speaking up. He's a ward of the state. Nobody stood up for this young man. It's something that you hear every single week. So if not for the courage of somebody from within to say, hey, Craig, because I wasn't a hero here, someone who we can't name and we can't even bring out and properly recognize, because if we do, their career would be over, their family might be over, their life would be over. That's what needs to change, and that's the vision I want to see. I don't want to just get rid of police, but I want real police who are good police and who are really serving us. And I want police, though, who ultimately, though, work for us, not us working for police. That's accountability.
Well said, Craig, well said. I'm going to guess that Lorenzo agrees with you. What would you like to see as a long-term outcome?
Of course, I would like to see more black police officers. The number of black police officers has never equaled the population, the black population of the city of Chicago. And most of those involved involved shootings are white officers or Hispanic officers shooting black people. Black police officers, for the most part, have not done that much shooting. A lot of them are not cowboys. They are from the community, and if they served where they worked, then you would not have as much brutality and excessive force. Of course, some of them are brutal, all kinds. It doesn't matter what your race is, but at least they view black people as human beings. You would not see them treating one as if he were a dog. And, if you had a larger population of black officers, FOP might not be the union that represents all police officers. I believe that was voted upon who would be the representative of officers, and most, I would say maybe not most, but there are many black police officers who feel that the FOP is racist. Many of the things they've said, quite a bit of what they've written, FOP newsletter, they listed me as, they repeated what Scott Ando said, I'm a traitor, I am anti-police. The FOP should not be, say, commenting on whether or not I am anti-police or anything. Let them do what they're supposed to do. Let them negotiate a contract. I would like to see the FOP replaced with a union that represents all police officers. That's what I would like to see.
Absolutely.
Dr. T, let me jump back in real quickly because Trina said a lot of things that were profound. And Trina, certainly speaking for, I won't speak for the older generation because I'm not.
We have to be truthful on this panel, Rufus. We ask you to tell the truth.
I'll speak for whoever we are and say, indeed, we absolutely must work together. And we must work with you because, if we've done our job well, then we do need to step aside and let you all lead the way. As you listed through a number of things, that we have imaging issues. And in order to change those imaging issues, a lot of things have to happen. I love lawyer shows and I love crime shows on TV. And one of my favorite shows used to be Blue Bloods, which was a cop show, right? Until I started watching it and seeing the depiction of black people on that show and seeing the depiction of this wonderful family of continual police chiefs, Irish, who were running everything, and they were holier than thou, and it was more than I could take. And so I wrote a letter to CBS to tell them how much I hated that show. Come on. Because, in fact, it did not depict anything like what we are and who we are and what we should be. And so it's these subliminal messages that we may see and others will see that will continue to police us in ways that are improper for who we are. So when we start to look at what this improper policing has done and what this inhumane view of us has been, there is an investment that needs to be made to give us back our humanity. And so when we start to look at what the objectives of all this should be, there should be clear reinvestment in our communities, reinvestment in early childhood, reinvestment in our educational institutions, reinvestment in our schools, clear ways for our children to go to college, clear ways to ensure that the schools on the west side, the schools on the south side are learning the same things as the children are in the schools on the north side and on the North Shore. There have to be things that really go in. We have to have an investment. As we know, we can sit and talk about policing, and I'm trying to keep it as tight, except we have to recognize that the only way that the police will treat us as we should be is if we get all the things that we're supposed to have and we are seen truly as humans. And so we can close schools because schools aren't performing, but the fact is if we're not putting the investment into the families and into the communities, then our children are not going to be prepared to go there and do well. And by the same token, if they're not doing that, then the police and the system and the television shows and everyone else will see us in a way in which we are absolutely not. But we will be that way because that is what the investment has been. I heard on WVON.
Tell them where you heard it. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I heard on WVON.
Let it sit. No, let it simmer. Give it a second.
Just a conversation about Dr. King and Dr. King's assassination. And I heard it and I went back and did some research and learned from the research that I did that there was in fact a trial and a conspiracy that included the federal government, the FBI, the CIA and all, that was actually proved out in court that Dr. King was killed by all of these entities. And after reading that, it changed anything that I had ever believed before. And so as I look at these things now, and as we see and read the police reports, or whatever those things were, we can't believe anything that we read because we fed things that are fed for us not to be treated in a humane fashion. So what I want to see is that investment in all these places, and yes, that investment in BBF Family Services that helps to improve the lives of those in one of our most disadvantaged communities, and other organizations like ours that really gives us a chance and gives us back our humanity.
I really love that you expanded this conversation too, because just because the focus is police accountability doesn't mean that these other topics aren't tangentially related. Before we go to the question, I do want to throw it to Sherry, because in your opening statement, you spoke about the need for economic investment in African American communities and what that really looks like. I think the protests that the young people put together and several organizations put together on Black Friday, blocking off the stores and hitting the pockets of the city of Chicago, was what really spurred all of this. $500 million drop in sales for some of those stores on Michigan Avenue, and that's probably a modest estimate, right? But how do we, and when you look at Black Friday protests and black folks trying to use buying power to take back some of the power that we see systematically. Is there a way that we can reinvest in our own community so that when we boycott, there are black businesses that we can support and we can bolster these South Side and West Side communities so they look like the North Side? How do we even begin that?
Well, you know, we had a discussion this morning in-house, and we talked about the fact that we had a sip and shop on the 28th, which is Small Business Saturday, right after Thanksgiving. And while a lot of people were out protesting, they weren't in their communities buying from small businesses that support those communities. And not all the businesses in our communities are black-owned, but a good portion of them are. And they depend, like everybody else, on the Christmas season to make their money for the year. Not only do they provide investment in our communities, but they provide jobs for those people that live in those communities, which aren't always provided elsewhere. So we need to make sure that when we're talking about damaging the lifeline of some of the majority-owned stores and the large box stores, and we're running out to buy TVs, that we think about spending our dollars and recirculating them in our own communities so that we can start to rebuild our communities and provide jobs for people who live there.
Absolutely, well said. I'm going to go ahead and go to the questions from the audience here. Some of our runners have already given me some of those questions. Continue to jot them down. And again, remember to put your emails there so we can get connected. And really, this is a conversation, a dialogue, not something with the panels dictating to you. So I like the spirit of the questions that are coming out. This one from Kelly says, will the Urban League please consolidate the proposed ordinances and legal changes and email them to the email subscribers? I'm going to guess that the answer is yes. And if you could keep us abreast of these proposals, that would be great. I know we mentioned the Fair Cop ordinance, but I just wanted to open this up to ask all of you, is there anything or any candidates that we should be looking at, or specific ordinances that you think that the people need to know about so that we can act on them with the power of information?
I just want to say the one thing that I already said, but now let me make it practical in terms of what it is. Right now, police unions are seeking to destroy all police misconduct records that are more than 5 years old. There's an easy legislative fix, but making anything happen legislatively is never easy unless people make it happen. So this is going to sound boring, but here's what needs to happen. Illinois Local Records Act, amended, one simple clause to amend. All it needs to say is that law enforcement agencies shall permanently retain all records that relate to complaints of police misconduct and their investigations, and that they shall not be destroyed. We need to, I can't emphasize enough from what I said before about what the risk is right now. That sounds like the most boring change in the world, but if there's one thing that needs to be done right now, it's that, or these records could go up in smoke.
Craig, are you saying that it's who does that? Is it the state legislators that propose that?
So there are two things. There are two places. One, there is a more boring nuts and bolts, but Local Records Commission for Cook County that sets the retention schedule for records. So a temporary fix could be the Local Records Commission could change the retention schedule and say, again, these must be permanently retained. That's not a permanent fix because the next month at the next meeting, they could say something different. So the real place, and because I think what we need to do is find a permanent solution, and that will trump this contract that should have never been entered in the first place. But that needs to happen now, and that permanent solution is at the state level. And that permanent solution is that there needs to be the law, the Local Records Act, the Illinois Local Records Act needs to be amended to specifically say that police misconduct records shall be preserved and not destroyed. That's simple.
So could I jump in on that just with one other observation?
Absolutely.
So Craig emphasized the negative possibility of the destruction of those records, but there's an immense positive outcome that's possible as well. The city has agreed to give to us the police disciplinary records of every officer to serve on the police force going back to 1967. We are prepared, when we get that information, having prevailed over the FOP, to immediately, with whatever data entry is required, to make it wholly public. This is power. information is power, and this is really serious power for everything that we're trying to accomplish, in these coming months and years. So that's what's at stake in this controversy.
Absolutely. Grab, thank you for adding that. I'm going to go to these questions that I received. This is a really practical question. How is it that officers or city officials are allowed to resign in the wake of current investigations and allowed to remain in good standing with benefits and pensions still carried by the taxpayers? And how can that change?
That's a good question. That is a good question. Gotta go to the lawyers.
That's what I said. That's what I said when I read it. I said, thank God I ain't a lawyer on this panel.
Lawyers.
And it speaks to, it's common sense, right? We know that McCarthy was fired, right? But what does the rhetoric say? He was forced to resign. And in the mayor's speech, what did he say? He said, I asked him to step down, right? So how do we get to a point where these people, in the wake of a scandal, aren't given the liberty of bowing out and accepting that pension?
And here's a related issue. It's following up on the same thing, because what's happened, and this is something that is at least partially addressed by an Illinois law that was just passed, the police reform bill in 2015. What happens when then someone resigns with this hanging over their heads? Guess where they go? No, to another police force in another neighborhood and do the same things. What do you think happened? What was it, Darren Wilson?
Darren Wilson, that's exactly what he did.
In Ferguson. And it's the same thing is happening. There was a Tribune investigation about these officers in Waukegan and where they had come from in North Chicago. So it's also making a record, and this is part, and I think it's an imperfect law right now, but one of the things that could be beefed up in that law is being sure that there is a record such that if an officer then goes to any other law enforcement agency, it will be easy to see the circumstances under which they left.
So there is a national registry for sexual offenders. So this is, we have to think different. And that's exactly what you're saying, that there should be. So there, again, the mayor ended his comments with everything is in our power to right the wrong. So let's do the things and let's right the wrong. Let's empower our people. Let's empower our representatives, our aldermen, our senators, our reps, to go in and give them what we need based on what we know that those things are. So if that's the kind of registry that certainly needs to exist, because actually black folks are all over the place. And if we're abused here, we get abused in St. Louis, we get abused in South Carolina, we get abused in Florida, and we need to know who those people are in all those places.
They're one and the same.
I have another question that speaks to that. Oh, go ahead.
Because sometimes, like one officer only had complaints, he never received a conviction. So can it be complaints and convictions?
It would have to be, because as it stands, complaints never turn into convictions. Yeah.
Because the whole system is corrupt.
Yes.
Jamie, you're looking at all complaints, not just findings.
The complaints. Yeah, no, what we have is right now, and the bulk of it is from the last 4 years, is we have some 56,000 independent complaints from citizens of, specific complaints of police abuse. We may, yeah. So, but the other point to make about this that Craig touched on earlier is, this is precious information. I mean, imagine you were a corporation. I mean, this is like what you use for quality control, for your bottom line, for being effective in the world,
Absolutely.
in your market. And the IPRA, the city, internal affairs go to great lengths not to connect the dots, not to learn what can be learned from this information. And a point that we often make is that the city, one of the first things to be calling for with the system we have now is for the investigators to be looking at patterns. And there are multiple patterns. There is the pattern of an officer who has a striking number of complaints or a sudden spike in complaints. There are groups of officers who ride together who each have so many complaints that just couldn't be a statistical accident. Something's going on. If you look at individual officers, and you can do this on the database, you look at individual officers and you see that there's a recurrent pattern of the same kinds of complaints. So take Officer Van Dyke. He had some 20 complaints prior to the Laquan McDonald shooting. They were consistently for excessive force coupled with racial verbal abuse. I mean, now
shootings,
and he was involved in two shootings. So, I mean, how many other officers are there like that out there? I'm not saying that 20 complaints says this is a bad officer. It does say there's a need to look into this officer's career.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Just one comment on that, which is because to make also clear the policy, because this is also a policy that needs to change. So it's now, because of the work of Jamie and all of our colleagues, we can all look at this. Everybody can look at this. But so the police department, and this is just indefensible, and this is IFRA too, as a matter of practice, has chosen not to look at pattern evidence, not to look at this evidence when investigating misconduct. I mean, think about that. Think about so you want to talk about every single police scandal that I could think of. It's just like Van Dyke. It's like you see patterns of complaints that happened before, nothing ever happened to them. And then we're surprised when then the big scandal hits, and then you look at their history, and no one's ever looked at it before. So number one is we gotta look, but we gotta force them to look. And number two, and this also relates because it came up earlier about cameras and body cameras and dashboard cameras. Shoot, we can have all the cameras in the world, but no one may be looking at them, as you may see. 70 to 80% of these car cameras, I talk to people in police command, and I talk to sergeants in the various districts, they don't work because no one's minding the store. You can have body cameras and pay all these companies millions of dollars, not black companies. Oakland, California was one of the first cities to have body cameras. They're now starting to use them, but by the way, they used them all those years. Nobody looked at them. Not a supervisor looked at them. I mean, they couldn't be a very powerful tool, as we see in this Laquan McDonald case. They could be a powerful tool for truth, but they could also be a powerful tool for training. You could start seeing, hey, what works, what doesn't work. As a supervisor, I can look at these different interactions that my officers have had and start to even train other officers. Hey, here's something this officer that did that was pretty good. And then also see what went wrong in these interactions. But if just saying we're going to give cameras to everybody and we're going to pay cameras, pay for all these cameras, I just want to make clear that does not solve a damn thing by itself. There needs to be people behind those cameras, good policies that go along with it, and ultimately, as Jamie said, some honesty, some truth. And that means that when a video exists, this is what good police departments do. Within 24 to 40 hours, that video, if there's a police encounter out in the public, it's available to the people. You don't hide the truth. That's how you earn trust.
Wow. I want to go to another. This is more of a comment than a question. And again, keep the questions coming. Speaks to somewhat of a policy issue, once again, as we've been talking about. Says police should be required to carry liability insurance that they pay for. And that police should be cross-checked against hate groups and databases and other groups to make sure that they're not a member of these organizations. So again, if anyone would like to comment on that piece, feel free, but I believe it kind of coincides with all of the policy recommendations you all have been talking about.
Excuse me, is there any way that these questions can be put into a list of questions and answers posted and given to the proper authorities of what came out of this meeting tonight?
Absolutely.
The answers just individually emailed to us. This should be frequently asked questions at the site to go to share with the community, so we don't keep asking the same questions.
Absolutely. That will happen. Absolutely. Great suggestion. Great suggestion. Why aren't city council members, specifically those on the finance committee, not being held accountable for their complicit approval in matters such as the $5.2 million payoff to the McDonald family?
Oh, they will be held accountable. I mean, that's all I'm going to say. But yeah, they should be held accountable.
With our vote?
And the chairman of the finance committee is an ex-policeman, named Edward Burke.
Yes, he sure is.
I want to give, I believe we have some aldermen in the building. I wanted to give them a chance to, if
I think we just
she
lost
left.
them.
I'm not in the practice of speaking on folk without giving them the opportunity to respond. So I'll give their side. As council members, they are stewards of the city's finances. So they've said that it was either pay $5.2 million now or pay double or triple that later if this happens.
They didn't even stop to look at what they were paying for it.
If you look at the transcripts from the meeting, there were only 2 aldermen, I don't want to misquote, 2 or 3 aldermen who actually asked questions, that actually asked a question as to what is in this video when the legal counsel for the city of Chicago, and here's another problematic relationship. The city council for the mayor is the same city council for the alderman. Is there a way that we can, to the lawyers on the panel, Paul, if you can chime in on this one, if you have some insight, is there a way for the legislative and executive branches to be separated in terms of the legal counsel, so that when the mayor's legal counsel represents something or presents something to the city council, the alderman should have someone that they should be able to speak to that more accurately represents the interests of the people? Is that something that's possible?
I don't think so. I think the problem is that the aldermen have to do their job and ask to see the videotape before and ask to see the evidence before they vote to pay large judgments. I think that's just the basic problem.
You know, let me jump in on the judgments.
Let me go to Rufus real quick.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I was simply going to say, when we look at our elected officials, they are from us. And in some communities, we don't always have those talents in certain communities that may be able to do all that. So the notion that there should be someone who can represent our interests with those who may have, if someone else has lawyers, then we should have lawyers. You know, there just should be someone else. I mean, I think that's a great suggestion, that there would be a lawyer in place or lawyers in place to help review those things on behalf of a different body, being our representatives and our aldermen.
What do you think, Craig?
Yeah, I guess the hold that I want to put on this is that the problem isn't paying the judgment, because justice in this case would not have been to force the poor family to go through a trial and prove this when you have a video that shows exactly what happened. That is not justice, and that's not what I would want our alder folk, and that's not what I'd want the city to do. What I'd want the city to do is when there is a case and cases that an instance like this happen that are real, that to do the right thing and to pay out. That's the right thing to do. Admit wrong. But what you don't do, and this is the problem with this, was not the questions weren't asked, obviously, but number 2 is you don't use settlement as cover-up. So here, a part of that settlement was, we give you the money if you don't release the video and if you don't release any of the police reports that show the lies. And we give you the money, and then we don't use that settlement as an excuse not to do our investigation and take the action with the officer. So justice is giving that family that money, but justice is also then holding accountable not just that officer, but holding accountable everyone who covered up. That's where the injustice to me was done, not paying this family $5 million.
Absolutely.
So can I, and just to throw in, CPD has spent over $500 million in the past 10 years in settlements for police misconduct. So I just wanted to throw a number out there for y'all, because I understand, like you said, right? It's not about not giving the family what they deserve, but it's about not addressing the problematic things that have consistently happened. In the past 10 years, over $500 million worth of consistency has happened, right? So we need to, I actually read an article recently that said, I think around the time when the Laquan McDonald videotape was on the table, the Burge, I think, no, the reparations case was also on the table, so it was on the same
session,
right.
same day.
Right, and so it was like so quick to, you know, I mean, you have these 2 cases, right, where nonsense is happening. Clear police misconduct is happening. And instead of being thorough, right, I think in the article, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was just kind of like, I think 2 people inquired, and then it was just kind of like, okay, we're gonna give a settlement, instead of kind of being more thorough and addressing this and understanding the pattern, right? That there was this pattern of this police misconduct in 2 separate instances.
Can I add to that? Because there were 2 things. First, there were 2 questions. Neither of them were about the video, or one of them was about the city's or the department's taser policy, because the initial responding officers had asked for a taser and had not had one. But the really striking thing to me about that moment, where you had the Burge reparations package, and this is an achievement, right? I mean, people have worked really, really hard for this. It was $5 million. It was token compared to what it should have been, but it involved an acknowledgement of police torture. It involved reparations. That was the word, reparations. Think about the number that Trina just mentioned, $500 million in police abuse settlements and verdicts over a 10-year period. And we all want to acknowledge Craig's point about doing what can be done for families under these circumstances and survivors and victims. But that $500 million didn't build anything. It didn't correct anything. It didn't repair anything. So, this is a whole other area that needs to be re-examined. The role of the city law office, in some cases, sometimes being part of the system of not knowing things we're capable of knowing about fundamental human rights abuses. And so this is a machinery. We talk about IPRA, we talk about internal affairs, we talk about the code of silence on the, among the rank and file and on the street. We have this whole machinery that we need now to thoroughly investigate, describe, document, and fundamentally dismantle and change.
Absolutely. Great way to cap that. I'm going to go to, this is another comment. This is a question. What other models can be used in Chicago that have worked in other cities? We posed that earlier in the panel. I was reading an article earlier, and I'll share it again. We're going to share all of these things at the end of the panel. Las Vegas made some real progress when it came to police reform. I was reading it on the way in, and I can't remember any of the numbers, but I'm going to send it to you. I promise. I promise. I promise. The next one is their running list of solutions. And trustee administrators of these solutions, we need to create a to-do list for a manual for accountability, because he essentially came up with his own this morning, and we'll surely add to that. The next question, how do we keep the pressure on so that we get our fair share of city contracts, jobs, TIF money in our neighborhoods? How does that happen? Again, I think it goes back to what we've been saying about holding our aldermen accountable.
Well, can I just say that the civil rights movement was, this is not something I know myself, I only know from reading. It had great leadership, but it was a movement of individual people acting together and organized. And you don't get anything done without continuous protest and organization. There's been a lot of activity in the last week or 2. That's great. There has to be continuous street demonstrations and protests for anything effective to happen. The change that I know the most about from growing up was the anti-Vietnam War movement. And there was massive street mobilization, protests, and it affected how people talked. You gave each other the peace sign, you said peace at the end of your conversations. You couldn't go to any public meeting without talking about the war. You couldn't go to a college classroom without talking about the war. If you want justice, it has to be at that level of mobilization. And the one other thing I'll say about that is one of my first cases I ever worked on had to do with the layoff of African-American butchers who worked for the A&P Tea Company, the A&P grocery stores. And we looked at when it was that black people actually got hired to be butchers, which was a good craft, high-paying job. And there were two periods. One was in 1943, and the other was in 1968. And that was because there was civil disturbance in 43 and in 68. And if you want change, there has to be mobilization.
Absolutely. We're going to go to closing statements if that's all for the questions, because I think we've got one more question. I'll let this be the last one from the audience.
Thank you. My question was too long to write.
Might be too long to say now. Come on. No, I'm just kidding.
I think what you all are doing is great, but listen, your panel need to hear from some of the people who've been suffering from police brutality, because see, when the pattern first started, we were complaining about being falsely arrested, falsely accused. Nobody paid attention to us. No. And so now it trickled down to where we're at today. So we need to try to find out how we're going to identify patterns when they occur, so these things won't fester up a couple of years from now all over again. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
And one final thing.
Please.
We always say that the police need to be trained. I think it's straight racism. We need to call it what it is. When you heard the mayor this morning say that one of the kids asked him, "Do you think the police will treat you or your kids the way they treat me?" He said no. And so we know they don't. So they come in our neighborhood intentionally to harm us. So we need to call it racism for what it is. And so that training is wasting money and time. We just need to try to be more selective in how we people.
Thank you. I want to hear from the crowd. Do y'all feel this meeting has been productive? Put your hands together if you felt this has been a productive meeting. It's a good start. It's a good start. It's just a baby step forward. You know, it's not lost on me that today, 150 years ago today, right? The 13th Amendment came to fruition, right? Abolishing slavery. I read the 13th Amendment, and it says, let slavery and indentured servitude be abolished, except in the case that someone is criminally prosecuted and convicted. And so we have a sincere issue with not only mass incarceration and the over-policing of our communities, but this thing has been in place since 1865. So you're right in what you're saying. It's a good baby step forward, just like everything that's been going on, a good baby step forward. So we're going to make a big step forward when we send these lists of recommendations to all of you. I want each of our panelists, before you guys shuffle on and head out, I want each of our panelists to make a closing statement, and I want to welcome everyone. I'm actually bringing this just a tad early because I want everyone to get a chance to connect with the panelists, and I want to receive everyone's email, not me, but the Chicago Urban League, to receive everyone's email so that you can get this information and we can move forward with this discussion. I'm going to start with Jamie Calvin. Please give us a closing statement.
Well, I'll be brief. You've been listening to us for a long time. I think as we began this, we all registered our amazement and our sense of a historic opening, a pivotal moment in our history in Chicago that's happening right now. And I think the thought I would leave you with is there are possibilities that are within our reach that are not going to be easy to achieve, but are achievable. It's going to depend on all of us. It's going to depend on all of us. And it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be simple. There's not a clear path, although there is a direction right now. And so I think we all need to ask ourselves, how are we worthy of this moment? How do we really, bring our best game to this moment?
Absolutely. Great thoughts. Trina, please.
So I've been writing away this whole time, and I'm going to try not to take too much of your time. For one, there is actually an action happening tonight at 35th Michigan. I think it started at 7. It's probably still happening. One of the purposes, so there are several purposes for that action. So for one, Anita Alvarez has got to go. Rahm Emanuel has got to go. We need to fund Black futures. We need to invest in CPAC. We need a participatory budget. Dante Servant needs to be fired without a pension. I'm happy that someone asked that question earlier. He needs to be gone without a pension. Police need to be held accountable for their actions. And if you all want to to do something more, right? You can't go outside. The action is too cold to go outside for the action, right? You don't want to do. I mean, maybe if that's how you feeling, maybe I'm gonna go out there in these heels, okay? Because I'm on the freedom side. I'm about it. I love black people. But that being said, BYP100 on Facebook. If you have a Twitter, BYP_100. If you have $5, if you have $10 a month to dedicate to BYP100, to supporting the young people who are so passionate and invested in the future of black and brown babies, right, then support us, right? That's my call to action. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. Craig, closing statement and call to action, please.
Yeah, I don't know that I really have anything new to say. I can go on about each of these different policies, but what I've seen is that as long as police brutality and practices like stopping and frisking folks remain concentrated in lower income black and brown neighborhoods, as long as the primary cost of all our various wars on drugs, wars on crime, fall on people of darker hues who live in places that we quote unquote know to be dangerous, then most white people, and if we're going to be honest with everybody in the room, truth is most relatively privileged black and brown people as well, haven't cared enough to act. And I'm not going to preach, but I'm going to just leave it to what Trina said. The real challenge, to me, is still making not everybody here in this room and people beyond this room to care. You're here because you care, and that means finding the political will. It's not these solutions. To me, it's funny. As long as these problems have lasted, it's not funny. We know what to do. Youth-led movements have brought us here. That's why we're here. That's why we're at this moment. And they've challenged us. Trina's challenged you, challenged everybody in the room. Come on out to 35th. And you know what? That's making people care, and things aren't going to change until we do. It's up to us. That's what Jamie said. Trina said, everybody here. That's what it's about.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Rufus, please give us a closing statement and a call to action.
Let me first say, this forum would not have happened without the forethought of the Chicago Urban League and its president, Sherry Runner, and I want to acknowledge him and her for that. And then to encourage all those who are powerful in the way to help remove the interim from her title. May 17th of 1954, Brown versus the Board of Education was passed. A year later, the Supreme Court passed a law that allowed it to be implemented with all deliberate speed, which, when asked what that meant, Thurgood Marshall said it means SLOW. And we look now, more than 50 years later, and we no longer have integrated schools or segregated schools. We have segregated school systems. So we got the law, we got all the things that had to happen, and then it began to be dismantled at every point since. Today in the Supreme Court, they discuss affirmative action and the reversing of that. As we sit here today and talk about, and as we demonstrate about this brutality that has been going on since the beginning of time, since the beginning certainly of us coming to the United States and before, what we know is that these things will find their way to continue unless we are vigilant with stopping it once we get what we're supposed to have.
Thank you.
Our humanity cannot be compromised. So the road forward for us is to really get in. We can't really have reconciliation until we have truth. We have to force the truth. We have to continue the fight.
Thank you. Paul Strauss.
Yeah, so I want to say three things. One is I want to thank Craig for correcting me. He's right that the problem with the aldermen was not approving, it wasn't that they approved the payment to the Laquan McDonald family, it's that they didn't ask the questions as to why the payment was being made and then release to the public the information about the police shooting that was the basis for that payment. Second, I want to recognize my friend Jeanette Wilson, who's here from Operation Push, who's been very active so far with Operation Push in this area. Third, just in terms of rhetoric, I believe in the rhetoric that people need an equal opportunity. It's a very old-fashioned phrase. I like it because you need to recruit fair-minded white people as well as African-American people and Hispanic people and other people to your cause. And the fair-minded people of this country do believe that everybody should have an equal opportunity. There are bigots, but I believe that most people do recognize that that's what people should have, is equal opportunity. And fair-minded people in this country know that African-American people do not have an equal opportunity. So asking for that, for equality, equal opportunity, I think is the right rhetoric to use.
Thank you. Thank you. Lorenzo, please.
I was told that the affair going on 35th in Michigan now is a police board meeting for those who are interested. As far as Mayor Rahm Emanuel and Anita Alvarez are concerned, we might have to wait until an election to get rid of them. We might not. If a lot of people don't accept it, then they'll be gone before that. But of course, everyone should, get people to register to vote. Only next time vote. They need to vote. True. And what I want to say is that vote for someone who has the same interests as yourself. Why do we have a billionaire as the governor of Illinois? Why do we have a multimillionaire as the mayor of the city of Chicago? Karen Lewis said even that if the Laquan McDonald case had been known, Mayor Rahm Emanuel would have still won because he has the money. It's almost as if we choose rich people because of some paternalism. We expect them to be our parents or something. They have nothing in common with most of us. They don't have friends like us. Their friends are rich. The people apparently who they look out for are rich and well-to-do like them. And that, is common sense, we might say. They have, as far as I'm concerned, they had nothing in common with me. And so I chose not to support them in the beginning. But I would hope that people would vote for people who actually have your interests at heart and who are somewhat like you.
Before, because I want to give the president of the Chicago Urban League the last word, I also want to make sure that I acknowledge State Representative Mary Flowers. Thank you for coming this evening. And all of those, Reverend Jeanette Wilson, thank you for coming this evening. Thank you all so much for being here. We have a few tangible things. Vote, vote, vote. Diversity on the police force. The police force, the city says they are now committed to diversity, right? There's an event this Saturday for which we'll send out information. They say they're now committed, so we'll take them at their word. Encourage the people that you know that would be good police officers to go ahead and apply, to be a part of the process, to step up. We got to talk about race openly. We talked about simple common sense policies, an ordinance and mechanism for which community advises the mayor on appointees, a body with real hiring subpoena power when it comes to police accountability, who actually can do more than just make a recommendation that we trust. And we have to find a way to protect officers that come forward. Just a few of the notes that I jotted. I wrote an essay over here, so we'll find a way to bring this back. But I would like to turn it over to President Sherry Runner for your closing statement, and also would like to thank you for putting this on and inviting me to be a part of this panel. It's truly an honor.
I'd like to thank you, Domiti. Thank you for taking the time and asking the questions and walking us through this. I'm going to be very short, but I think the most important thing for me about this entire time, and I think we've said it over and over again, is this is not just about Laquan McDonald. It's about the practices, the systemic practices of the Chicago police force, the criminal justice reform that we need to see done, and all of the things that flow from that in terms of making our communities stronger. Without our communities strong, this city does not thrive. And when the city doesn't thrive, it will die. And that will mean something to someone at some point. But we must continue to have these forums. We must continue to march, and we must continue to keep the pressure on. It can't stop here, and it can't stop at Christmas time. It has to continue going on. Thank you, everybody.
That concludes the panel. Thank you for joining us this evening, and remember, not let the conversation end here.